This is a review of Lim by Merritt Kopus. In Lim, the player is a flashing rainbow block moving about a maze. The player can press a button, and their block will change colors to conform to whatever colored block is nearest to them. But the camera will zoom in, and the block will begin moving uncomfortably slow. If the player releases the button, it will zoom back out. Their block will begin flashing colors, and possibly be pushed around by other blocks in the area. Once the player is caught, and the other blocks begin pursuing them, these aggressive blocks will not stop attacking the player's block unless they've managed to escape into the next corridor. The player can become trapped in the maze by other blocks. They may be unintentionally pushed out of the maze, where they wander outside of the maze entirely, or, with enormous luck and patience, they can reach an ending to the maze, where another block sits and begins flashing colors with the player's block. Being that the player is a block, and the other moving characters are also blocks, it becomes very easy to anthropomorphize all the blocks as individual people. Although important to others' critiques of the game, I want to try to avoid that and understand these blocks as vital, breathing, even alive, but not necessarily human. Lim is a manifestation of the forces of love, the attraction and repulsion that create action within objects. On the surface, we have one party who has a love for understanding. This passion compels them to hide within another's suit, to navigate dangerous spaces, to seek some sort of capital T truth about themselves, or about the world they inhabit, or maybe even about something greater. The other party also has a love for understanding. However, unlike the player, the other blocks are reactive forces that limit the player's expression of love. Their love for understanding causes them to force the player's block into submitting to their understanding of identity. This reactive love is where we find the source of violence. So, Lim forces us to understand mechanizations of love and identity, especially within culture. The player makes love to the game the moment they are flung out of space. Through a glitch in the collision detection, it is very easy for the player to be pushed between the blocks of the map and find themselves on the outside of the maze walls. They are now purely encapsulated in a creative zone where they are free to do whatever they want. More importantly, what they desire. This becomes one of the most frightening and beautiful parts of the game, because this is where the player now shares information freely with the computer, without the limits of the maze or other blocks. In the context of the philosophy of this abstract sex, the result of the glitch is orgasm. To capture that expression is beyond words, and it can only be described by play. The systems within Lim are chaotic, confusing, and unsettling. Sometimes the player's character flashes colors, and sometimes it defaults to a certain color in certain places. Sometimes blocks will attack the player's block, even if they're blending in, and sometimes they won't attack even if the player isn't blending in. These dynamics make the player very unsettled and feel as if they're not in control of the situation. This is what makes the player's expulsion from the game so evocative. They'll be trapped within a vortex of violence when all of a sudden, without a sound, boop! Now the player's outside of the maze. Calm, controlled, safe. This is what the systems of the game evoke, navigating spaces with varying potentials for violence and never knowing for sure what that potential means. The chaos of Lim's systems is foiled by the upper level system that is the maze. The thing about mazes is that they only have one rule. You can't go through the walls. Mazes are the epitome of control. This makes it interesting when the other systems within the game conspire to break the very first rule of the game. The systems conspire and collapse in on themselves in a beautiful and chaotic way, and these emergent systems reflect society's own beautiful collapses as individuals constantly find new ways to express themselves and break out of the mazes that equally bind them. Lim is a sparse game, blocks colliding in a maze based on just a handful of colors, but the starkest set piece of the game is the sound and shaking when the player zoomed in. This is the internal violence that a self-loathing person finds as they analyze their existence in public. It becomes crippling, deafening, and blinding. The player's blocks slows down, the sound gets louder and more aggressive, and the shaking and zooming causes the player to not know exactly where they're going. It's not really a camera moving as much as it's the world growing insurmountably around the player. As Lim ends, the player sees a block at the end of a corridor. There's no escape, as the player's only safe place, the corridor, seems to have become invaded by these violent blocks. But as we approach, we find that this block is just like us, and it flashes with us. This is the affirmation of a player's love. Then the screen goes dark, and the player's block disappears. The player has to fill in the ending from this point. For me, the 2 blocks get to go to Rainbow Block Heaven. The word limb has many roots throughout Germanic language, most commonly finding itself meaning something like a bodily member, which taken literally translates in English to limb with a silent B, like a bodily member referencing an extremity from the body. However, we can also find it in words like sublime, where a bodily member comes together with another in sublimation. In Swedish, limb means glue, so that's literally the coming together of 2 bodies. In the case of the game Lim, it's most implied that the title refers to the idea of liminal space, the place where transition, waiting, and not knowing is. This is exactly where Lim situates itself as a horrifying game of moving in the world. The player waits and tries their best to not be blocked or pummeled by other blocks that look differently from their block. It's something of a twist that the safest places in Lim are also the most liminal. The corridors protect the player from danger, and they provide the player's character a space to flash rainbow colors without fear of other blocks affecting that. Unfortunately, the player cannot wait forever in that space, because action is impending, and the player must push forward. This is the expression of the ousted, or the societal capital O other, where a non-other may fear the limiting. It means that this safety becomes a luxury for the other. The hallway in Lim is a luxury, as most of the game is spent zoomed in and concentrating on protecting yourself from the other aggrandizing blocks. Of course, the hallway eventually ends, and the player must face anti-liminal reality once again. Simply, Lim says, ambiguity must die. To this end, the orange and blue blocks work to purge anything representing difference from their space. And it's this violence that is represented within Lim. Not necessarily a physical violence, although that is implied by the sound effects, but more specifically, a violence of space. You cannot be here because you are an alien to me. This has been a review of Lim by Merritt Kopus. It's free to play online. Extra resources for this review have been supplied in the additional info below the video. I'm Solon, speaking for Rainy Day Let's Play. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.